Welcome back to another episode of the Rise Over Run podcast. I am Doug Barnett. I'm here with my co-founder, Brant.
What's up?
So maybe you didn't listen, but maybe you did. We have talked to 4 of our employees about how they got, what the process of hiring was like at Remi. In part 1, we talked to Cambry, one of our UX designers, and Sam, one of our engineers. And in part 2, we talked to Hunter, one of our subject matter experts, and Haley, one of our operations coordinators. And now you're going to hear from one of our leaders, our VP of product, Nate, to hear a little bit more behind the scenes of how do we ingest the funnel of hiring, and how do we sift through that? How do we think about resumes, and how do we get people actually into a place where we start talking to them and interviewing them? So that's what you're going to hear next on the podcast. All right, we are here with Nate Hopkins. Nate runs product here at Remi. Interesting story about Nate that we're not going to talk about today. We hired Nate to be a PM. We kind of had to sell him on that idea because he'd never been in product management before. And we're like, just trust us. This is going to be cool. We were definitely right. To give you an idea, if you're watching this and you don't know Nate personally, we promoted Nate from product manager to VP of product in 1 month. That's who your coworkers are at Remi. Nate is a very, very inspiring, hardworking, ethical, great coworker that we are very proud to have here. But we're not going to talk about his personal journey today. We're going to talk about, pull the curtain back a little bit about what it's like to work through our hiring process. And Nate not only runs product here at Remi, he also runs our analytics team. Nate is very skilled in business intelligence. And so the very first step of our funnel, just like anywhere else, is we got to go evaluate resumes, LinkedIn profiles, etc. So what is the first filter that you're going to look for if you're looking at a resume?
I start by looking for comps. I'm looking down the resume and I'm thinking, what are the things I can look for here that are going to be a signal of talent or a signal of actual skill or actual past successes? So you can look at the places they've worked as an example. And if someone had a job at Joe's Lighting Emporium as the data analyst there, it's just not as strong of a signal as someone who was able to get through the hiring process at an actual tech startup or an actual tech, business that I know has a more rigorous hiring process. And so that's the first thing.
Okay. So hold on just this piece. The first thing I think people have to be honest with themselves about on their specific resume is I worked at Joe's Emporium. They're not going to think that's that cool. And in fact, we interviewed Sam Wasden on this podcast, and one of the problem with Sam's resume was this exact problem. And we told him, and we talked to each other about this. We would not have interviewed Sam had he not gotten in via a connection. And so, first step, you got to be honest about your resume. You got to look at it and say, they're not going to be that impressed with Joe's Emporium. So if I want to go work at this really ambitious place, I have to get in a different way than presenting a cold resume versus it's okay, I went to this college and I got this GPA and I led this function at the college, this group, and then I instantly got an internship at Amazon while I was in college. This is similar to Eric. Eric had 4 super impressive internships that were we want to interview this person.
Yeah.
It's the quality of institution and where you've worked is the very first signal on a resume of whether or not we want to have a discussion. And because it speaks to, does this person have the ambition and desire to go work with the best? Totally. That's the first thing that we're looking for. It doesn't mean that you can't get here, but you're probably not going to get here through a cold outreach if you just don't have any winners on your resume. Is that a fair assessment, generally?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, if you have 8,000 resumes sitting in front of you, you have to figure out some heuristic
And what I want to be really clear here, it's not that you have to go to an impressive school or you have to have a great internship, but if you're gonna inbound cold, you better have something that stands out on your resume, like jumps off the page. Okay, so that's first step, is like you're gonna go evaluate quality of institution that person has been a part of. What's next?
Well, if you're looking at a resume, and let's say they have a quality something on there that's like you worked somewhere, or you have a good place you went to school, or something impressive in that way, you can learn pretty quickly by just reading bullet points. The language they use, the way they talk about their impact that they're making, you can tell when people are writing stuff to sound impressive versus I have made a real impact before somewhere that I have worked. I know how to talk about data. I know how to display that I did something that mattered to a company. And it's pretty easy to sniff that out.
Yeah, this is one of these ones where I'm like, okay, if I'm giving someone advice about how to talk about the things on their resume, it's like, okay, you went to Amazon. Okay, cool. Like, good job. Now it's like, talk about what the impact that you actually have. The advice that I would have here for people that are building their resumes or building their LinkedIn profile, go talk to the most intimidating, successful person that you know and ask them, how would you read this paragraph that I wrote about Amazon? Would you skip it? Would you gloss over it? Would you care about anything that's in there? And what the number one thing of advice that I would provide for people like that is say it in less words every single time. It's not that I don't care about you. I care a lot about whether or not we believe you can do the job. I am not going to read 5 sentences. I'm just not. So figure out a way to say it with more brevity. Is that a fair assessment to make?
Yeah, there's like a weird tendency where people want to, feel like they need to include like the full scope of everything I've done at this job. And like, I really want people to understand like just how much I did there. And it just feels like word soup. Like it's almost incomprehensible about their actual impact.
Totally.
So step 1, make an actual impact at your previous employers.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I would add here too, like a mistake I see commonly, and honestly, like both BYU and Cornell told me to do this thing, and it's put a number in every single bullet point. Always put a number. I increased this by X%. I did this many thousands of dollars saved. And the problem is there, like, it's not that bad of advice to put numbers. Numbers are helpful signposts for me to understand your impact. You put a number in every bullet point, I start to sniff out what you're doing too. You're just trying to make stuff up to like match a form of something interesting or impactful, and it just doesn't look good. And I can tell you're making stuff up.
I would also encourage people to talk like humans.
Sure.
It's always like these so formalized. I would just like, look, I've had a lot of impact at the company. Here's the thing I'm most proud of. Bam.
Yeah.
I don't need more than one really clear signal from that specific position. Just get one right. And if you really nail it on that sentence, I'm like, I'm proud of a lot, but this is the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
That's enough. I don't need 5 bullet points with the exact KPIs. That's terrible advice.
Yeah.
That's awful advice. Okay. I read your resume. I don't think you're full of it.
Yeah.
I think you actually made an impact where you are. Now what happens next?
Yeah, so what you want to do is get the candidate on the phone. If I find someone that's like interesting, that I want to get them on the phone, and I'm going to start asking them questions about kind of 2 major things. One, I want to ask them about, tell me about your past work experience. You're going to walk me through job by job, promotion through promotion, and I want to get a sense of like, how did you grow? Do you have a good sense of the impact that led you across these growth steps? Or were you just kind of moving around or being dragged?
Was the wind taking you?
Yeah, is it push or is it pull? And how did you move into these positions? So that's one. And then 2, I really love to dig in with folks. Like, I'll ask them to tell me, what's your favorite project you worked on? And they'll take 5 seconds to start to explain to me what that project was. And they're like, okay, we're going to keep going. And I drill and drill and drill and drill into that project because I want to know who came up with that problem. Why was it a problem? Why did you know it was a problem? How did you think about solving it originally? What did you do to go solve it? What did you do to check that you actually solved it, right? And what I find often is people can't answer that very well. They had a favorite project because it was fun to work on, and they have no idea what happened with it.
Well, this is a common interview tactic here. Brant, why do we do this? Why does it matter?
I mean, I think in the course of an interview, especially for people that are like either, experienced or charismatic, they kind of know how to frame and position things in such a way that make it appealing to the interviewer, and have probably done interviews themselves even. And so, what Nate's poking at is like, we are trying to shave away layer by layer and almost like remove the frosting, so to speak, and get to what's underneath and look for the inconsistencies. And
if there are any.
Yeah. And if you're talented at doing this, like, you find inconsistencies more times than not, after people have kind of given you the shiny facade. And in those inconsistencies are the very things that actually matter for them having success at the job.
So takeaway here, make an impact at your company and then be able to talk about it.
Totally.
Like, and it's really, as much as people think they can fake their way through this thing, it's really easy to pick out when it's fake. Okay, let's say somebody passes the initial screen, then what?
I want to do a technical assessment with them. It's really critical because despite me drilling into this stuff, people can still be really convincing and not have the technical ability. And if you look at, like, let's say data roles, I find often that you can find data folks that are either really talented with data, but really bad at working with people, or the opposite.
Yep.
And it is rare to find the combination of both. And so the first kind of steps, you get that side of the soft skills, but by the time you get to that technical screening is really like, okay, let's see you work through some problems here, visualize your data, dig for data, solve, take a word problem and actually come back with something meaningful that I could use in the business. And that's where the really charismatic people often fail.
So this gets into a broader thing we've talked on the podcast about quite a bit and why we've talked about it. There's this job hopping thing. I want to get promoted every 2 years. That's fine. You can do that. I think when you don't work for great companies, you probably should do that, whatever. I don't think it's a good thing. And here's why. For the real companies, you actually have to have the skills. And if you're job hopping like this, I don't know if your focus is on the correct thing. Your focus is on promotion, getting the raise, more responsibility, and less on like, am I learning? Did I do a good job? Like, am I absolutely nailing the core competencies of the role? And this is why, is eventually it's going to bite you if you don't have the true skills for the real companies that need it, because we're going to try and really test if you can do the actual job once you're here, so that you can hit the ground running. Did I get that right?
I think there's like nuance to this in that the people that are the best at the job hopping, they tend to be like middle of the pack in their, job or career or whatever. So they're not terrible.
They're not low performers.
The obviously terrible people don't.
No, they wash out.
Yeah, they wash out. But like right above that, it's like, yeah, I'm fine. And they'll never have like a real strong path at any company that they're at. But in the course of kind of like hopping from company to company to company, it kind of like smooths over this thing. And 6 months into hiring someone like this, the new company realizes like, okay, this is like a middle of the road person. They're not going to progress, whatever. And I think it leads to this like 10-year stretch of someone's career where they don't really change. They don't really get better at the actual skills. And they find like a real hard ceiling at some point that's really, really, really hard to like move once you're like that far in.
Okay, so got to get through the technical screen, and then we can move fast after this. After that, basically the hiring manager is going to introduce consensus. We've got to go as a team, have consensus here. And then the very last thing they get to do is interview with me. The only thing the people at Remi trust me to figure out is whether they're going to like working there. That's the only thing that I'm trusted with. This is a pretty rigorous process. And like, we're really trying to root out falsification, like false positives is like the real clear thing. How good do you guys think we are at getting, like, where we don't flag someone as having really high quality, even though they are?
The really high quality people, they'll like put their resume in, and they'll inbound, and they'll like find other ways to get to you. And so even if we happen to miss them on a resume poll, they find their way back into our radar oftentimes. And so I think it's pretty rare.
This is why picking 5 companies instead of 100 companies to go get into is so important, because there may be some type of negative signal that we passed over. You've got to really have force in your way.
Like, I'll just say one of mine that's like a complete non-starter. If you have open to work on your LinkedIn, I'm just out. Like, immediately I'm out. I'm not even gonna look at I'm done. And I know that it's like a blunt heuristic and that there's someone that's an exception to this and whatever. But those people do, like, to your point, tend to like still pierce through my
why? I have reasons I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I have reasons for this. I want to hear what yours are.
I mean, one, you're saying I don't have a job, because if I did, I wouldn't put this publicly on my profile so that my employer knows I'm looking for another job. So that's, case in point number one. I think the second part of it is it generally lines up with people that take this like passive approach. It's just like, put the flag up and people will just like line up at my door and I will end up with a job. And that's how I approach everything in life. And those people I have no desire to work with, because it affects everything else in the workplace. You have to spoon feed them every bit of their work.
What we have found the most success with, as far as getting new people to come into Remi, is there's this person in the company that we trust and that we know and we understand the quality. And if they're willing to raise their hand about this other person, that's the highest signal that we can get early on in the process. The open to work flag signals to me there is not a single other person in your life that is raising their hand at the company that they work for and saying, that person should work here. That is a massive negative signal to me.
Yeah.
About the way the other people in your life feel about your quality of work.
And I have sympathy for like why people choose to do it. It's like, hey, here's this tool by which I generally use to find jobs or like network professionally. And they have given me this convention to let everyone know like I'm available. It's kind of similar to putting out a resume. It just far too often correlates with people that don't have the qualities that we look for.
Yeah, and I think you kind of talked about this, but like a mediocre effort to go find a job is going to land you with a mediocre job.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
It's not that we are trying to make this hard. We're trying to actually have the hiring process match what it's like to work here, which is challenging. And so the hiring process needs to be challenging in order for us to screen the level of commitment it's going to take to be successful here. Otherwise, we're going to make a bad choice. And it's like, well, just give me a chance. You are not going to like working here, period. If you don't like the challenge of getting a job at Remi, you will be miserable. And we're trying to screen that out. We don't want people to have a bad experience here. So I think hopefully maybe this is illuminating. I think most people feel like the internal mechanics of how a company hires feels like a black box, and like pulling the curtain back a little bit about, the things that are going to make it easier for you to get your way through our funnel. We certainly want to expose, because we would love for more people we would love for hiring to be a little bit easier than it is today. Maybe this will be, or maybe it won't be. So we appreciate you spending some time with us.